Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter gave us a wide range of characters, each remembered in their own way. But there's one trait that especially stands out among them: their intelligence. And here an intriguing picture emerges. Some we immediately perceive as clever and talented, while others come across as simple or even foolish. Yet first impressions are not always correct. Today we'll look at wizards who turned out to be smarter than they seemed, and those whose so-called brilliance turned out to be more illusion than reality. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Dolores Umbridge. At first glance, Dolores Umbridge appears strict, calculating, and very intelligent. Her speech is full of bureaucratic jargon, her manners refined, and her authority is made clear from the very first moment. Yet upon closer inspection, her intellect proves little more than a facade. In truth, her power relied entirely on her position in the ministry and the support of more influential figures. At Hogwarts, she only worsened the atmosphere, imposing pointless rules. If Umbridge had truly possessed strategic intelligence, she would have noticed both the rise of Dumbledore's army and the trick that lured her into the hands of the centaurs. All we really see is arrogance without true wisdom. Number 2. Nymphadora Tonks. Cheerful and sometimes clumsy, Tonks may give the impression of being light-hearted and even frivolous. In the films, she was often portrayed as a comic figure, and many viewers underestimate her abilities. But behind her smile lies a sharp mind. Tonks excels at improvisation, making quick decisions and forming clever deductions. No wonder her mentor was none other than Alastor Moody, one of the most paranoid and perceptive aurors in history. Moody would never waste time on a random girl. Her wit and courage made her an irreplaceable member of the Order of the Phoenix. Number 3. Lucius Malfoy. Lucius always considered himself the pinnacle of wizarding society: wealth, lineage, connections. But behind this polished exterior stood a man whose intellect never matched his ambitions. He failed to strengthen his family's standing under Voldemort and could not shield himself from the consequences of his own blunders. Even the Dark Lord quickly lost patience with him, frustrated by his cowardice and incompetence. In the end, Lucius wound up in Azkaban, emerging only as a pitiful shadow of his former self. His brilliance was nothing more than a myth he crafted himself. Number 4. Luna Lovegood. Luna is the exact opposite of Lucius. She is often seen as strange or even slightly mad, but her unconventional thinking hides immense strength. She perceives things that others overlook. Her ideas and insights often helped Harry and his friends. Luna isn't afraid to seem odd, and in that lies her wisdom. She refuses to mold herself to others' expectations, instead observing the world through her own unique lens. In fact, Luna may be one of the most intellectual students Hogwarts has ever seen. Number 5. Neville Longbottom. From the very first pages, Neville appears as clumsy and constantly confused. His classmates mocked him, and his teachers expected little. But with each book, he grew, and we came to see that beneath his insecurity lay a brave and intelligent young man. His knowledge of herbology was unmatched, and once he received his own wand, his magical abilities finally flourished. In the end, it was Neville who delivered the decisive act that changed the course of the final battle. The very boy no one took seriously became both a hero and a wise leader. Number 6. Viktor Krum. Viktor Krum's fame always ran ahead of him. He was praised as the best Quidditch player, yet during the Triwizard Tournament it became clear outside the field he was far from brilliant. Krum often relied on hints and help, but never truly displayed outstanding magical ingenuity. His strengths lay in his physical training and competitive spirit, but to call him a clever strategist or a top-tier wizard would be a stretch. Number 7. Rubeus Hagrid. Hagrid is often seen as a good-natured simpleton, but this is a huge misunderstanding. Yes, his magical abilities were limited by his broken wand and his expulsion from school. Yet his knowledge of magical creatures surpassed that of most wizards. What's more, Hagrid has a remarkable sensitivity to people, their feelings and motives. His heart and intuition often guided him to the right choices, even when he appeared awkward on the surface. Hagrid is proof that intelligence takes many forms, and it is not always measured by spells or grades. Number 8. Sybill Trelawney. Sybill Trelawney was the butt of many jokes at Hogwarts. Her classroom, filled with incense and crystal balls, made her look like a performer rather than a professor. Students mocked her predictions of death, and even Hermione dismissed her subject as woolly. Yet hidden beneath the theatrics was a gift that changed the course of the wizarding world. In Order of the Phoenix, during an unexpected trance, she delivered the prophecy, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches." Those words marked Harry as Voldemort's equal and shaped the fate of both. Her true seer moments were rare, but when they came, they cut through the smoke of her dramatics. She foresaw Peter Pettigrew's return to his master, though she had no memory of speaking it. Dumbledore never mocked her. He protected her because he knew the weight of her visions. The image of Trelawney as a foolish woman with oversized glasses was only half the truth. The other half was far more unsettling, a hidden mind that, in flashes, saw destiny itself. Number 9. Ginny Weasley. Ginny Weasley was often pushed to the background in the films, remembered mostly as Harry's love interest, but the books showed a very different picture. She grew from the shy girl in Chamber of Secrets into a sharp, confident witch. Her words cut as well as her spells. When Ron mocked her for dating, she snapped back, "Just because you've got the emotional range of a teaspoon doesn't mean we all have." That wit showed a mind that refused to be underestimated. Her strength shone brightest in the Dumbledore's army meetings. Ginny mastered spells quickly, earning respect even from older students. Harry noticed her skill, admitting that she was a demon with a wand. In the battle at the Department of Mysteries, she fought alongside him, casting curses with precision and courage. This was no background character. She was a strategist and a fighter, as capable as any of the main trio. Ginny also understood Harry better than most. She gave him space when he pulled away and stepped forward when he needed support. That balance was not luck. It was insight, an ability to read emotions and act at the right moment. While others saw only the boy who lived, Ginny saw the boy carrying unbearable weight. Her intelligence was quiet, not shown in classrooms like Hermione's, but in empathy, bravery, and the fire of someone who refused to be overlooked. Number 10. Gilderoy Lockhart. Gilderoy Lockhart arrived at Hogwarts with a dazzling smile and shelves full of books that bore his face. Students believed they were meeting a true hero, a man who had faced banshees, vampires, and dark curses, but the shine wore off quickly. When asked to show practical defense, he fumbled. His famous dueling club ended in embarrassment as Snape disarmed him in seconds. "Expelliarmus!" Snape cried, and Lockhart landed flat on his back. The mask of brilliance cracked to reveal the emptiness underneath. The truth was worse than incompetence. Every adventure he had written about belonged to someone else. He had used memory charms to erase the real heroes and claimed their triumphs as his own. Hermione once asked him about the challenges of defeating a werewolf, and he eagerly spun a tale that collapsed under the simplest question. It was not knowledge, it was performance. He was an actor, trapped in the robes of a professor. His downfall came in the Chamber of Secrets itself. Cornered, Lockhart tried to use a memory charm on Harry and Ron, intending to erase their knowledge and steal their story too. But he used Ron's broken wand, and the spell backfired. "Obliviate!" he shouted, only to erase his own memory. The irony was complete. The man who built his life on stolen memories lost his own. Behind the golden smile was not intelligence but vanity dressed as genius. Number 11. Minerva McGonagall. Minerva McGonagall's presence in the classroom was sharp as steel. Students often whispered that she was too strict, too distant, yet the truth lay beneath that hard surface. Her discipline was never cruelty. It was wisdom shaped by years of service. She demanded excellence not for her own pride, but because she saw what her students could become. When Harry was caught chasing Malfoy in his first flying lesson, she didn't punish him. Instead, she marched him straight to Oliver Wood, declaring, "I've found you a seeker." She saw talent where others saw trouble. Her wisdom showed most clearly when danger struck. During the Battle of Hogwarts, she did not waste time on fear. She animated the statues of the castle with a single spell and sent them to fight. "Hogwarts is threatened. Man the boundaries, protect us. Do your duty to our school." Her voice rang with command. It was not just power in her wand, it was clarity in her judgment. She could see the field, the risks, and the needs faster than anyone around her. McGonagall also understood people. She knew when to be stern and when to be soft. She gave Hermione trust with the time-turner, despite the dangers. She gave Neville encouragement when others doubted him. That balance of strictness and compassion is rare. Most teachers lean too far one way. McGonagall managed both. She earned respect not by demanding it, but by proving that her rules had purpose. Even Dumbledore leaned on her judgment. She was the one who stayed when the Ministry tried to control the school. She was the one who defended Harry again and again, not blindly, but because she knew truth when she saw it. Her intelligence was never loud. It was steady, disciplined, and full of justice. Minerva McGonagall may have seemed like the cold shadow of Hogwarts, but in reality, she was its guiding flame. Number 12, Arthur Weasley. Arthur Weasley was often the subject of jokes in the Ministry. His fascination with Muggle plugs, batteries, and rubber ducks seemed ridiculous to men like Lucius Malfoy. Yet what others dismissed as foolishness was actually vision. Arthur understood that the Muggle world had its own kind of brilliance. He wanted to bridge that gap, to learn from what wizards ignored. "What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?" he once asked Harry in Chamber of Secrets. It sounded comical, but behind the question was genuine curiosity. His mind worked differently from most purebloods. When Voldemort's return spread fear, Arthur's knowledge of Muggle inventions became practical. He knew how cars, radios, and telephones could move information and people faster than magic in some cases. That knowledge made him useful in the fight against Death Eaters, even if the Ministry never valued it. Arthur's ability to see worth where others saw nothing was a rare kind of intelligence. He also showed cunning in protecting his family. Living in the burrow, with little money and many mouths to feed, required constant resourcefulness. He charmed old objects, repaired what others would throw away, and turned scraps into tools. Molly cooked, but Arthur engineered. The fact that his children grew up happy in a home that should have collapsed under its own poverty was proof of his cleverness. It was not book knowledge, it was survival intelligence. In Order of the Phoenix, when Nagini attacked him, Arthur's resilience stood out. He did not panic, even while bleeding in the Ministry. He tried to reassure Harry in the vision, calm and steady despite the pain. That was his wisdom, to stay grounded, to value life, and to keep curiosity alive in a darkening world. Wizards laughed at his obsession with plugs, but Arthur Weasley's mind was not small. It was wide open, willing to learn, willing to adapt. That is what made him far wiser than he appeared. Number 13, Sirius Black. Sirius Black often looked like a man driven by impulse. He laughed in the face of danger, picked fights, and seemed to rush headfirst into trouble. But beneath the reckless surface was a sharp and calculating mind. He had survived 12 years in Azkaban, a place where most prisoners lost their sanity. He did it by using logic. He clung to the fact that he was innocent, and he remembered he could turn into a dog. Dementors fed on despair, but they could not touch the simple instincts of a beast. That was brilliance disguised as madness. When he escaped, Sirius showed another side of his intelligence. He moved through the wizarding world while the entire ministry hunted him. "He's dangerous! He's a murderer!" Cornelius Fudge declared in Prisoner of Azkaban. Yet Sirius was always one step ahead. He infiltrated Hogwarts, eluded Dementors, and left no trace but whispers. To survive that kind of pursuit required more than courage, it required cunning and strategy. His quick thinking appeared again in the Department of Mysteries. Surrounded by Death Eaters, Sirius fought with both skill and wit. He taunted Lucius Malfoy, laughing as he blocked his curses. "Come on, you can do better than that," he shouted. He understood the power of words in battle. Mockery could break an opponent's rhythm, make him reckless. That was Sirius's mind at work, hidden behind the grin of a fighter. Even his manipulations of Harry showed his cleverness, though shaded with recklessness. He knew how to speak to his godson, how to make him trust, how to guide him without appearing as a teacher. Sirius used charm and raw honesty as tools. He was not just a warrior, but a tactician of the heart. The world saw a wild man, quick to anger, quick to laugh, but behind the fire burned a mind that survived prison, tricked the ministry, and fought Voldemort's army with wit as sharp as his wand. Number 14, Peter Pettigrew. Peter Pettigrew was never seen as the clever one among the marauders. James Potter had charm, Sirius Black had boldness, and Remus Lupin had quiet intelligence. Pettigrew seemed weak, someone who clung to stronger friends. Even at Hogwarts, his reputation was that of a follower, not a thinker. Yet appearances were deceiving. When the war began, he made the choice that kept him alive while the others perished. That was not loyalty. It was cunning, born of fear. His greatest trick was his transformation into Scabbers, Ron Weasley's pet rat. For 12 long years he lived unnoticed in the very heart of the wizarding world. He sat at the Weasley dinner table, listened to conversations, and even travelled to Hogwarts, hiding in plain sight. No spell revealed him, no suspicion touched him. "That's been in our family for ages," Ron once said about Scabbers in Prisoner of Azkaban. The brilliance of Pettigrew's disguise was not in strength, but in patience and timing. When Sirius finally cornered him, Pettigrew showed his true talent, manipulation. He cried, begged, and twisted words until even Harry hesitated. "You wouldn't kill me, Harry. You wouldn't betray your father's friend." His voice shook, but his mind was working. He understood weakness in others, the cracks in their hearts, and used them. He survived by making himself seem harmless, pitiful. That is a kind of intelligence, though a dark and shameful one. Even Voldemort kept him alive, though he despised him. Pettigrew found his value in servitude, offering loyalty where no one else dared. He had no bravery, no brilliance in spellwork, yet he endured where others fell. That endurance came from a sly kind of mind. The boy everyone thought was useless turned out to be the rat who outlived lions and wolves. His story is a reminder. Intelligence does not always roar. Sometimes it squeaks. Number 15, Bellatrix Lestrange. Of all the characters who walk through the pages of J.K. Rowling's saga, few are as contradictory as Bellatrix Lestrange, and she is remembered as the madwoman who cackled in the face of death, a creature whose loyalty to Voldemort bordered on worship. Yet when one examines her battles, her cunning, and the way she manipulated chaos to her advantage, it becomes evident that her intelligence was not diminished by madness, but sharpened by it. Behind the shrill laugh and wide eyes was a calculating duelist who knew how to control the tempo of combat and exploit the weaknesses of even the most experienced wizards. Her most notorious victory was at the Department of Mysteries in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, where she killed Sirius Black. In that duel, she was not simply reckless, she maneuvered through the chaos of curses flying from every direction. While most Death Eaters fell one by one under the combined force of Dumbledore's army and the order Bellatrix adapted. She isolated Sirius, matching him blow for blow. Rowling describes how she struck when the opportunity appeared, sending him through the veil in the death chamber. This was not an accident of madness. It was timing, awareness, and a lethal instinct. The second jet of light hit him squarely on the chest. The laughter had not quite died from his face, but his eyes widened in shock. He fell backward through the archway and disappeared behind the veil. It was a duel, she finished, because she read the rhythm of the fight better than anyone else in the room. Her intelligence was evident again when she faced Hermione, Luna, and Ginny at Malfoy Manor in Deathly Hallows. Bellatrix's rage when she discovered the sword of Gryffindor was tempered by a sharp intuition. She immediately suspected a trick, recognizing that the weapon before her should not have been there. "If this is a true sword, then the Dark Lord must be informed at once," she screamed, her fury masking the fact that she had deduced something vital. Dumbledore's protections were still at work, and the young captives were hiding knowledge far beyond their years. Madness alone would not have led her to such a conclusion. That was the mind of someone who understood the intricate web of deception her enemies wove. Dueling itself is an art that exposes a witch or wizard's intelligence, and Bellatrix excelled in it more than nearly anyone else. In the Battle of Hogwarts, she took on Hermione Granger, Luna Lovegood, and Ginny Weasley simultaneously. These were not untrained children anymore, but battle-hardened fighters who had survived years of war. Yet Bellatrix toyed with them, laughing while deflecting curse after curse. Her ability to juggle multiple opponents and remain in control of the engagement speaks to an intellect that processed information at a rapid pace. Where others would panic, she calculated. Her mind worked like a predator's, anticipating the next movement of her prey before they had made it. To call her intelligent is not to say she was wise. Bellatrix's brilliance was destructive, aimed at chaos, cruelty, and domination. Unlike Hermione, who used her intellect to preserve life and solve problems, Bellatrix directed her cleverness toward tearing worlds apart. In this sense, she was underestimated because she did not build but destroyed. Wizards like Dumbledore or Snape were acknowledged as geniuses for their mastery of magic that transcended combat. Bellatrix's genius hid behind violence, and so most dismissed her as a fanatic. But in truth, she was the embodiment of tactical intelligence, the kind that wins wars, even if it does not write books. Her devotion to Voldemort is often used as evidence of her lack of reason, yet even this had an undercurrent of calculation. She aligned herself with the most powerful wizard alive, ensuring a place of influence and protection. Her obsession blinded her at times, but it also gave her access to the highest levels of magical strategy. She listened, she learned, and she executed orders with ruthless efficiency. When Voldemort entrusted her with guarding the Lestrange vault at Gringotts, it was not out of blind favoritism. He knew she was competent enough to strike terror into anyone who dared approach. Her failure there was due not to stupidity, but to the brilliance of Griphook and the trio's plan, a rare case where Bellatrix was outmaneuvered. The duel with Molly Weasley is often remembered as Bellatrix's undoing, but even here her intelligence is revealed. She underestimated Molly because she miscalculated the depth of a mother's fury. Until that moment she had treated the fight like a game, underestimating her opponent in a way she never should have. Yet even in those final seconds, Bellatrix displayed cunning. She feinted, she dodged, and she drove Molly to the brink. The fatal mistake was arrogance, not lack of intellect. Arrogance has undone many geniuses, and Bellatrix joined that list when her cackle became her downfall. Comparisons to Harry Potter are inevitable. Harry was not by academic standards a genius. He struggled with homework, relied heavily on Hermione's knowledge, and was not naturally gifted at spell creation or advanced magic theory. Yet Harry was intelligent in another way: emotional intelligence, the ability to read people, trust instincts, and see through deception. Where Bellatrix calculated in combat, Harry calculated in relationships. He understood when to trust Dobby, when to follow his instincts about Draco, and when to sacrifice himself. Dumbledore said it clearly. "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Harry's intelligence was in his choices, Bellatrix's in her cunning destruction. Number 16, Albus Dumbledore. Under the stained-glass windows of Hogwarts' Great Hall, Albus Dumbledore stood as a figure of untouchable wisdom. To the students, he was the very embodiment of brilliance, the headmaster who always seemed to know the right thing at the right moment, the one who could disarm fear with a twinkle in his eye and a calm word. Yet as the events of Harry Potter's journey unfold, cracks in this image begin to appear. Behind the calm voice and eccentric demeanour lay a man who, though undeniably intelligent, often allowed his brilliance to become a cage of overconfidence. The difference between appearing wise and actually being wise becomes more apparent when one considers the consequences of his secretive choices. One of the clearest examples of Dumbledore's questionable wisdom appears in his handling of the prophecy regarding Harry and Voldemort. He discovered early on that Harry was the child destined to have the power the Dark Lord knows not. Rather than preparing the boy openly for such a burden, Dumbledore chose silence. His reasoning was that Harry's sacrifice needed to come from a place of free will, but in doing so he condemned Harry to years of confusion and danger without context. Harry himself recalls in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix the frustration of being kept in the dark, saying bitterly, "You don't know how it feels. You're the one who kept me in the dark." Dumbledore admitted later that his love for Harry made him hesitate, but the truth remains that his decision nearly broke the boy under the weight of half-truths and silence. This tendency to withhold information was not just a flaw, but a recurring pattern. Consider Severus Snape. Dumbledore's decision to entrust the most dangerous of double lives to a man tormented by his own guilt was a gamble that could have easily failed. Snape's loyalty was tested constantly, and though it held firm in the end, it also created years of tension, mistrust, and unnecessary cruelty for Harry. Dumbledore knew that Snape's hatred of James Potter would manifest in disdain toward Harry, yet he did nothing to stop the toxic relationship between them. Here, Dumbledore's clever manipulation of Snape's seemed less like wisdom and more like dangerous exploitation. Another telling example comes with the Philosopher's Stone. When the stone was hidden within Hogwarts, Dumbledore permitted challenges designed by the professors to protect it, but these protections were so tailored that they acted as an invitation for clever students to attempt them. Hermione, Ron, and Harry themselves managed to bypass every obstacle. While it served the story as a trial for Harry, it revealed something troubling. Dumbledore allowed children to face mortal danger as part of what seems almost like a test of courage. His intelligence in designing such a system did not protect the vulnerable, it instead placed them directly in harm's way. Dumbledore's pattern of secretive control was most destructive during Harry's 5th year. In the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore deliberately avoided Harry, believing that closeness between them would be exploited by Voldemort. This left Harry isolated, confused, and vulnerable to manipulation. The tragic result was Sirius Black's death, a blow that could have been prevented had Harry felt more trust and guidance. Dumbledore admitted later, "I cared about you too much. I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth, more for your peace of mind than my plan." Here lies the paradox. His intelligence told him secrecy was necessary, but his heart told him otherwise, and in this tension he allowed a loyal friend of Harry's to die. The brilliance of Albus Dumbledore was often sharpened into manipulation. He maneuvered Harry like a chess piece, ensuring that events led the boy closer to his final confrontation with Voldemort. This was evident in the way he orchestrated the hunt for Horcruxes. Rather than openly sharing what he knew about them, he guided Harry with vague hints and cryptic directions. Even when he showed Harry the memory of Tom Riddle's youth, he never gave him the full map to destroy Voldemort. His excuse was that Harry needed to learn for himself, but one could argue that his reluctance to fully reveal the plan was another form of arrogance. By believing only he could control the flow of information, he left Harry unprepared at critical moments. Even his celebrated duel with Gellert Grindelwald raises questions about his wisdom. Their youthful alliance, rooted in dangerous ideas about power and control, shows that Dumbledore's intelligence had long been coupled with pride. He admitted to Harry in the Deathly Hallows that his greatest flaw was ambition, confessing, "I was gifted, I was brilliant, I wanted to escape, I wanted to rule, I was not wise." The duel itself, which ended in Ariana Dumbledore's death, was the ultimate reminder that even the most intelligent minds can be blinded by arrogance. His remorse shaped the man he became, but it also left him permanently scarred by the realization that intelligence does not always mean wisdom. His handling of Draco Malfoy's mission in The Half-Blood Prince also exposes this duality. Dumbledore knew Voldemort had tasked Draco with killing him, and instead of intervening directly to save Draco from the impossible burden, he chose to let events unfold. He relied on Snape to carry out the final act, binding both Draco and Snape to a chain of manipulation that nearly destroyed them. While it revealed his strategic brilliance in securing Snape's position, it also showed how coldly he was willing to use lives as part of his larger plan. His intelligence crafted a flawless move in the war, but his morality remained clouded. Number 17, Severus Snape. Under the dim candlelight of the dungeons, Severus Snape was always seen as the embodiment of malice. His hooked nose, greasy hair, and perpetual sneer created the image of a man who thrived on tormenting children. Harry Potter and his friends were convinced that Snape's very existence was fueled by bitterness. Yet beneath that facade lay a mind sharper than any blade, a man whose intellect and cunning surpassed the expectations of both allies and enemies. He was more than just a teacher of potions. He was a creator, an innovator, and a strategist whose every step shaped the war against Voldemort. When Harry first encountered him in the classroom, Snape presented himself as a tyrant. He asked Harry questions about ingredients and potions in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone that seemed deliberately cruel. "Tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Snape's tone was cutting, and his intent was to humiliate. To most students, this revealed nothing but arrogance. Yet behind this interrogation was an astonishing depth of knowledge. Snape's mastery of the most obscure elements of potion-making displayed not only his intellectual superiority, but also his capacity to innovate. Unlike professors who simply repeated textbooks, Snape created his own formulas and adjustments that even the Half-Blood Prince's annotations demonstrated. The mysterious textbook Harry later inherited, filled with careful handwriting, was living proof of Snape's creative genius. Here was a man who looked at traditional potion recipes and found ways to improve them. His correction of the draft of Living Death, where he instructed to crush the Sopophorus bean rather than cut it, produced better results than the original instructions. These notes were not the work of a mere teacher, but of an inventor who dared to improve upon centuries of magical tradition. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Hermione Granger was astonished at how Harry's potions suddenly outshone hers when he followed these annotated instructions. That Harry's sudden brilliance came directly from Snape's private knowledge reveals how underestimated the professor's intelligence truly was. But Snape's genius was not limited to potions. He invented spells, a rare achievement in the wizarding world. The most famous of these was Sectum Sempra, a curse with devastating effect. While the spell itself was cruel and dangerous, the very fact of its creation shows extraordinary intellectual ability. It required imagination, experimentation, and a level of magical understanding that few possessed. Even the incantation demonstrated his mastery of language, combining Latin roots to craft something both powerful and elegant. This invention alone placed him in the same category as magical pioneers, yet his work was never acknowledged by the academic world, hidden in a battered student's textbook. Beyond the walls of Hogwarts, Snape revealed another layer of his intelligence, his talent for deception and strategy. He lived for years as a double agent, fooling both the Order of the Phoenix and Lord Voldemort. To deceive Albus Dumbledore would have been unthinkable, but Snape's loyalty to him was real. The real danger was convincing Voldemort, a master legilimens, that he was faithful. Few could hide their true intentions from the Dark Lord, yet Snape managed it for decades. This feat required more than courage. It required mastery of occlumency and a mind capable of constructing an unbreakable facade. His very survival was proof of his brilliance. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Voldemort confides in Snape, believing him to be one of his most trustworthy servants. That Voldemort would trust anyone, let alone a man who had once been a Death Eater and then returned after desertion, was extraordinary. This deception was not accidental, it was carefully cultivated. Snape's cold demeanour, his apparent cruelty, and his constant undermining of Harry all played into the image Voldemort needed to see. He became exactly what Voldemort expected, a bitter man seeking power, when in reality he was the guardian of Harry's survival. Even Harry, who prided himself on instinct, completely misjudged Snape's intentions. For years he believed Snape was plotting against him. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Harry suspected Snape of trying to steal the Triwizard Cup or aiding Voldemort's return. In reality, Snape was protecting him more often than not. During the Quidditch match in his first year, Harry thought Snape was cursing his broom when it was Snape who was counteracting Quirrell's curse. The tragedy of Snape's intelligence was that its subtlety went unnoticed. Where other heroes flaunted their bravery, Snape's contributions were hidden in shadows, his intellect disguised by cruelty. Strategically, Snape's greatest achievement was maintaining his role at Hogwarts during Voldemort's reign. As headmaster, he outwardly appeared to enforce the new regime, yet in secret he made choices that protected students when he could. He sent the Sword of Gryffindor to Harry through his Patronus, ensuring that the trio could continue their mission. This delicate balance of appearing ruthless while secretly aiding the resistance required more than cleverness. It demanded psychological mastery. Every word, every gesture had to be measured. One mistake would have meant exposure, torture, and death. His intellect extended even into the realm of emotions. Though embittered, Snape understood the power of love, something Voldemort could never grasp. His enduring devotion to Lily Potter became the foundation of his secret allegiance. When Dumbledore asked him in Deathly Hallows if he had grown to care for Harry, Snape's furious reply, "For him? Expecto Patronum?" conjuring a silver doe, revealed not only his pain, but also the sharpness of his emotional intelligence. He recognized that protecting Harry was the only way to honor Lily's memory, and this clarity of purpose fueled his actions for years. Number 18. Argus Filch. Of all the figures that wander the endless corridors of Hogwarts, few are as easily dismissed as Argus Filch. His reputation has always been one of bitterness and mediocrity, the caretaker who curses under his breath and rattles chains of punishment in the dungeons. Students often laugh behind his back, teachers barely acknowledge him, and even ghosts use him as a source of amusement. Yet beneath the grime of mockery lies a character who is far sharper than he appears, one who survives in a world where he is considered almost nothing. Filch is a squib, unable to perform a single spell, and still he holds power over children who wield wands, over a castle filled with enchantments, and over centuries of secrets buried in its stones. To thrive in such an environment without magic is no accident. It is evidence of cunning, resourcefulness, and a certain quiet intelligence that deserves closer attention. The image of Filch scowling at students sneaking out after curfew is easy to picture. He prowls the halls with a lantern in one hand and Mrs. Norris, his loyal cat, padding silently beside him. Harry himself remembers being caught in the act more than once, and readers remember the many times the caretaker suddenly appeared at exactly the wrong moment. How could a man without magic track down students who had every magical advantage to outwit him? He had no marauder's map, no invisibility cloak, no advanced spells to aid him. What he had instead was deep knowledge of Hogwarts itself. Filch knew the secret. Passageways of the school better than anyone except perhaps the Weasley twins, the book reminds us. That alone places him in the rare company of those who truly understood the hidden architecture of the castle. This mastery of the physical, non-magical side of Hogwarts gave him an edge. While others relied on spells, Filch relied on memory, observation, and persistence, and very often that was enough. Consider the case of Harry and Ron being caught by Filch while trying to sneak into the trophy room for a midnight duel in Philosopher's Stone. It was Draco Malfoy's trap, but it succeeded only because Filch appeared almost instantly. The text notes, Filch knew the school's secret passageways like the back of his hand. He anticipated where rule-breakers would go, cutting off their paths not with charms or enchantments, but with clever foresight and patience. He had learned to think like the mischievous students he hunted, a talent many professors lacked. Even Severus Snape, with all his magical might, was sometimes outmaneuvered by students, but Filch was a constant thorn in their side. His awareness of human behavior, his instinct for timing, and his ability to use the castle's design to his advantage made him far from foolish. On the contrary, it showed a man who had turned his greatest weakness into a subtle form of strength. The caretaker's methods, though often cruel, revealed a calculated mind at work. He designed elaborate punishments, catalogued infractions with obsessive precision, and kept detailed records of every misdeed. His filing cabinets, stuffed with yellowed parchments of detention slips, were as intimidating as the chains he kept hanging in his office. When Dolores Umbridge arrived and gave him authority, Filch thrived, not because he suddenly had more magic, but because his system of order had always been in place, waiting for recognition. He had mapped out the possibilities of control in the school long before Umbridge came. "I always knew I'd be useful one day," Filch practically gloated in Order of the Phoenix. His sense of structure, his relentless attention to detail, and his obsession with discipline are often mocked, yet they reflect an intelligence focused on survival. In a castle full of chaos, Filch carved out order with the only tools he had. His relationship with Mrs. Norris, too, reflects his cleverness. Many treat the cat as a simple companion, but she was in truth an extension of Filch himself, a silent spy who patrolled the castle in places he could not. Through her, he doubled his presence. Students feared Mrs. Norris because they knew that wherever she appeared, Filch would follow. Mrs. Norris spotted them at once. She flicked her lamp-like eyes to the caretaker, who came hurrying around the corner. This was no accident. Filch trained her as his eyes and ears, compensating for his own limitations. While other caretakers might have relied on spells, he built a surveillance system from scratch, turning a cat into a force that struck terror into young rule breakers. It was, in its own way, a brilliant solution to his lack of magical detection. One of the most telling signs of Filch's intelligence is his sheer persistence. Year after year, generation after generation, he endured ridicule and disrespect. Wizards mocked him behind closed doors, students made him the butt of jokes, and even teachers often brushed him aside. Yet he never left. To survive decades in such an environment without collapsing into despair requires a mind that constantly adapts. He found ways to matter in a place that told him he did not matter. He used his knowledge of corridors, his files of punishments, his cat, and his alliances with authority figures to carve out a domain of control. Few squibs in wizarding history ever lived so close to magic without succumbing to bitterness or vanishing into obscurity. Filch remained. That is a kind of intelligence that should not be underestimated. The infamous Quickspill Course episode in Chamber of Secrets exposes another facet of Filch's cunning. When Harry accidentally discovers the pamphlet on Filch's desk, he realizes that the caretaker has been desperately trying to teach himself spells through correspondence. Harry spotted a letter on the desk, addressed in purple ink, Quickspell, a correspondence course in beginner's magic. Though humiliating, this detail reveals Filch's refusal to give up. He sought education in a system that had excluded him since birth. Many would have resigned themselves to fate, but Filch continued to explore alternatives, however desperate they seemed. Even if he failed, the attempt itself shows a restless mind unwilling to accept absolute limits. When the Chamber of Secrets was opened, Filch's terror was more personal than most realized. His cat, Mrs. Norris, was petrified, and his grief was genuine, but beyond emotion, Filch displayed practical reasoning. He immediately accused Harry of wrongdoing, not because he had evidence, but because he was sharp enough to recognize patterns of mischief. Harry was at the scene of too many incidents, and Filch's suspicion, though misplaced, was grounded in observable behavior. He was wrong about the cause, but not entirely foolish in his deductions. His instincts as an investigator were honed by years of tracking pranksters, and while he lacked magical knowledge, his ability to connect circumstances showed how his mind worked. Filch's loyalty to Hogwarts itself also reveals a deeper calculation. He could have abandoned the castle and sought anonymity in the non-magical world. Instead, he remained, understanding that his value and survival depended on his proximity to the magical community. Hogwarts gave him identity, purpose, and a sense of authority, however small. He crafted his life so that the very place that rejected him became the source of his influence. That kind of paradox requires a mind capable of seeing opportunity where none seems to exist. Even in bitterness, Filch understood that his safest place was among those who mocked him, because it was also the only place where he mattered. During Umbridge's reign, his excitement at using whips and chains was unsettling, yet it also underlined his long-term strategic patience. For years, he had been denied real power. When a moment finally came, he was ready with his system of punishments, his knowledge of the castle, and his unshakable willingness to enforce authority. Filch positively quivered with delight at the prospect of whipping students. Disturbing as it is, it shows that Filch had always been preparing for such a chance, holding on to his methods until someone in power valued them. His intelligence lay not in kindness, but in endurance and readiness. It is easy to call Filch a failure because he cannot cast spells, but one must consider how many full-blooded wizards were outwitted by schoolchildren year after year, while Filch managed to corner them with no magic at all. The marauders themselves, geniuses of mischief, went to great lengths to avoid him. Fred and George Weasley, masters of prankery, still viewed him as a legitimate threat. Even Harry, armed with an invisibility cloak, could not always escape his watchful eyes. That fact alone should reshape the way readers think about his abilities. He may not be a wizard, but he was no fool. In a castle that glorified magical brilliance, Filch embodied a different kind of intelligence, the intelligence of survival. He turned the knowledge of walls and staircases into a weapon. He built a surveillance network from a single cat. He cultivated authority through records, punishments, and loyalty to power. He endured humiliation without vanishing, and in doing so, carved out a permanent place for himself in Hogwarts. His story is not one of grandeur or victory, but of resilience, strategy, and cunning. Those who dismiss him miss the subtle brilliance of a man who, without a wand, still managed to hold sway in the greatest school of magic in the world. Number 19, Draco Malfoy. Draco Malfoy has long been painted in the minds of readers as the quintessential spoiled aristocrat, sneering at anyone who dared to cross him, hiding behind his father's influence, and treating Harry Potter as though he were some irritating insect to be swatted away. In the early books, this impression is solidified through his arrogance, his insults toward Hermione and the Weasleys, and his constant attempts to undermine Harry. Yet the complexity of his character begins to reveal itself most powerfully in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Here, Draco is no longer the childish tormentor who thrives on schoolyard rivalries. Instead, he is thrust into the shadows of a dangerous mission, one that demands cunning, secrecy, and a type of strategic thinking that few gave him credit for possessing. The boy who once flaunted his family's wealth is now forced to demonstrate the sharpness of his mind, and it is in this crucible that his underestimated intelligence begins to surface. The mission given to Draco by Voldemort was no small matter: to kill Albus Dumbledore. For an adult, the task would have been harrowing, almost impossible. For a 16-year-old student, it was a crushing weight. Yet Draco, despite his terror and inexperience, does not simply flounder in despair. He begins to devise multiple plans, creating redundancies and testing different methods to achieve his goal. He attempts the cursed necklace that ends up in the hands of Katie Bell, and later the poisoned mead intended for Dumbledore but intercepted by Ron Weasley. These attempts might have failed, but they show a capacity for strategic improvisation. Draco is not merely swinging blindly. He is analyzing weaknesses, looking for angles, and testing the defenses of Hogwarts' most protected figure. Perhaps the most significant of Draco's schemes lies in his manipulation of Hogwarts' security system itself. The school, fortified by charms, enchanted walls, and vigilant professors, is portrayed as nearly impregnable. Yet Draco identifies a vulnerability, the room of requirement. In this, his cleverness shines through. He recognizes that the room can transform into whatever its seeker needs most, and he uses it to conceal the vanishing cabinet, a magical artifact that becomes the linchpin of his plan. The other cabinet sits in Borgin and Burke's, and by painstakingly repairing the Hogwarts cabinet, Draco establishes a secret passage for Death Eaters to enter the castle. The feat is not one of brute force or reckless bravery. It is a patient, intelligent process that requires magical skill, persistence, and a deep understanding of loopholes within the magical world. It is worth recalling the description in Half-Blood Prince when Harry realizes Draco's secret. The two cabinets were a pair. If someone walked into one of them, they would instantly emerge from the other. Draco Malfoy had fixed the vanishing cabinet. This line is pivotal because it shifts the perception of Draco from an incompetent antagonist to a capable, calculating operator. He has done something that even many skilled wizards might struggle with, not only repairing a complex magical object, but also integrating it into a broader strategy. This was no childish prank. It was the groundwork for one of the darkest invasions Hogwarts ever faced. Yet alongside this demonstration of intellect, Draco's emotional state unravels. The same book shows him breaking down in a bathroom, sobbing under the pressure of his mission. When Harry encounters him there, Draco's vulnerability is laid bare. Snape later insists Draco's not a killer. This moment underscores the complexity of his character. He has the mind for strategy, but not the heart for murder. The tension between his intellect and his emotions becomes the defining feature of his arc. His mind allows him to progress shockingly far in Voldemort's assignment, but his conscience prevents him from crossing the final line. It is not weakness in intelligence that stops him, but the remnants of humanity that even years of indoctrination from Lucius and Narcissa could not erase. When we contrast Draco's cleverness with Harry's supposed recklessness, the balance between them becomes intriguing. Harry is often seen as a character who survives by luck, bravery, or the protection of others. Hermione's intellect and Ron's loyalty frequently anchor him. Yet, Harry has his own kind of intelligence, an emotional, instinctive awareness that allows him to make connections others miss. In Half-Blood Prince, however, it is Draco who occupies the role of the plotter. Harry spends much of the year trying to convince others of Draco's involvement in something sinister, but his evidence is weak until the truth finally emerges. The irony is that Harry's gut feeling is right, but Draco's ability to conceal his work demonstrates a different type of cleverness, one rooted in deception and secrecy rather than open investigation. The Hogwarts Express scene at the start of Half-Blood Prince shows this contrast vividly. Draco taunts Harry with veiled hints of his new importance, and then, when cornered, immobilizes him with Petrificus Totalis and leaves him hidden under the invisibility cloak. This action is not only cruel but tactically sharp. Draco ensures Harry is silenced and unable to follow him, all without drawing the attention of others. The arrogance is there, but so too is the practical efficiency of someone who is adapting quickly to his dangerous new role. For perhaps the first time, Draco has real power in his hands, and he uses it with a frightening awareness. The vanishing cabinet repair is the strongest testament to his cunning, yet it also reflects the quiet, unseen labor that contrasts with Harry's public heroics. Harry's victories are often dramatic, watched by many, sealed with flashes of bravery. Draco's triumph, however, is in the shadows. He works alone, hiding his actions even from his closest allies like Crabbe and Goyle. In a way, his intelligence is more Slytherin than Voldemort's own arrogance. Voldemort often underestimates Hogwarts' defenses by brute force. Draco undermines them with subtlety and patience. This is why Dumbledore, in the end, speaks to him with a kind of respect. He sees the boy not only as a victim of Voldemort's manipulations, but also as someone who has shown unexpected capability under immense pressure. It is also telling that Dumbledore offers Draco protection, saying, "It is my mercy, not yours, that matters now." Even at the brink of death, Dumbledore recognizes Draco's inner struggle. His cleverness has brought him to this point, standing face to face with the headmaster, wand in hand, but his trembling arm and his hesitation betray a boy still clinging to his conscience. This moment becomes a paradox. Draco's mind has succeeded, but his heart refuses to follow. He is too intelligent to be dismissed as a fool, yet too human to be the cold executioner Voldemort wanted him to be. Some might argue that Draco's plans only succeeded because of Snape's intervention, and indeed Snape does step in to complete the task and spare Draco the guilt of murder. But Snape himself acknowledges the difficulty of the boy's assignment. Draco's ingenuity in exploiting the cabinet, in attempting multiple assassination methods, and in concealing his activities from Hogwarts staff shows that he was far from incompetent. If anything, his failure was moral rather than intellectual. He lacked the cruelty required to finish the mission, but the preparation up to that point speaks volumes about his underrated intellect. This re-evaluation of Draco also reshapes how we view his earlier actions in the series. His constant attempts to provoke Harry in Chamber of Secrets or his sneering comments in Prisoner of Azkaban may have looked like childish bullying, but perhaps they also hinted at a boy who observed weaknesses, who tested boundaries, who experimented with power in whatever limited ways he could. By Half-Blood Prince, those instincts had matured, sharpened under Voldemort's threat. He was no longer testing the waters, he was swimming in them, whether he liked it or not. Draco's intelligence, however, should not be mistaken for wisdom. Intelligence allows him to find loopholes, to engineer plans, to calculate risks. Wisdom would have urged him to resist Voldemort's influence, to recognize that the task was doomed from the start. This distinction is crucial, for while Draco proves himself clever, he also demonstrates the limits of cleverness when separated from moral clarity. His shadowed brilliance becomes a tragic reminder of how intellect can be twisted when guided by fear and desperation rather than principle. The juxtaposition of Draco's hidden intellect with Harry's instinctive bravery creates one of the most compelling contrasts in the series. Harry is not always academically brilliant, nor is he meticulous in strategy, but he possesses a clarity of purpose and an ability to inspire loyalty. Draco, by contrast, shows that he can engineer results with precision, but his inner conflict strips him of the resolve to see them through. In this way, Rowling paints intelligence not as a single quality, but as a spectrum of traits, cunning, emotional acuity, moral judgment, and distributes them across her characters in ways that challenge simplistic labels. When we reflect on Draco Malfoy in the aftermath of the war, It becomes clear that his intelligence was both his survival tool and his prison. He used it to navigate the impossible mission in Half-Blood Prince, and it likely helped him avoid destruction in the chaos of Voldemort's downfall, yet it also bound him to the expectations of his family and the dark mark of his heritage. Harry may have emerged as the celebrated hero, but Draco's hidden cleverness revealed under duress stands as one of the most intriguing demonstrations of underestimated brilliance in the saga. He is not simply the arrogant schoolboy we met in Philosopher's Stone. He is the boy who found a way to let Death Eaters into the safest castle in Britain, a reminder that intelligence, when unrecognized, can sometimes be the most dangerous force of all. Number 20, Molly Weasley. Molly Weasley is one of those characters who seem ordinary until you look closely and then you realize she is anything but. At first glance, she appears simply as the matriarch of a large, somewhat chaotic, wizarding family. Readers meet her scolding Ron at King's Cross, fussing about sandwiches and worrying whether the twins will behave, yet that very ordinariness is deceptive. Hidden inside the image of a bustling mother is a woman of sharp intelligence, careful strategy, and a quiet strength that carries her family through some of the darkest years of the wizarding world. It is easy to overlook her brilliance when she is surrounded by characters like Albus Dumbledore, Hermione Granger, or Severus Snape, but the truth is that Molly's kind of intelligence is the sort that saves lives. Her household management itself is evidence of remarkable mental discipline. The Burrow is not just a home, it is a miniature kingdom she rules with competence. Consider the reality of raising 7 children, Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred, George, Ron and Ginny, in modest financial circumstances. Wizards are not immune to poverty, and the Weasleys often lived on the edge of it. Yet Molly manages. She makes clothing stretch across generations, she serves meals that feed armies of hungry teenagers, and she creates an environment of warmth that makes even Harry Potter feel, for the first time in his life, what a true home could be. This is no small feat, and it shows her mastery of resource allocation, problem-solving, and emotional intelligence. If intelligence is not only about knowing spells but about keeping a family alive and whole, then Molly's wisdom is unmatched. The books highlight her resourcefulness repeatedly. When Harry spends Christmas at the Burrow, he is struck by the knitted jumpers Molly makes for everyone. They are tokens of affection, but they are also practical, inexpensive solutions to a real problem, keeping her family clothed in cold winters. As Molly tells Harry, "You don't mind a Weasley jumper, do you?" In that question lies the gentle cunning of a woman who turns necessity into tradition, transforming poverty into something rich with love. What others might see as lack, she reframes as care. That kind of mental reframing is a sign of deep intelligence, the ability to create dignity where others might feel shame. Her intelligence also reveals itself in the way she navigates social relationships. Molly builds alliances without calling them that. She opens her home to Harry and later to Hermione. She maintains ties with Arthur's colleagues at the Ministry and eventually becomes part of the secret resistance in the Order of the Phoenix. Her maternal warmth is not a mask, it is genuine, but it also functions as a powerful way to bind people together. Consider how Harry's loyalty to the Weasley family becomes one of the most important emotional anchors in his life. Without Molly's instinctive understanding of how to include Harry, how to protect him without smothering him, he might have remained adrift and alone. Instead, he grows into a leader with roots because Molly gave him belonging. Molly's intelligence is not only domestic but also strategic in moments of danger. At the end of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when the wizarding world is thrown into panic by Voldemort's return, she becomes one of the backbones of the Order of the Phoenix. She helps organize, she protects her children, and she balances secrecy with honesty. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when tensions rise at Grimmauld Place, it is Molly who tries to protect the younger generation from knowledge she feels might endanger them. Her instinct clashes with Sirius's more reckless openness, but this very clash shows that Molly is constantly thinking about risk, about long-term survival, about what information should and should not be shared. She may not speak with the authority of Dumbledore, but she makes choices with the precision of someone who sees further than others realize. The famous confrontation that cements Molly's brilliance happens in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. During the Battle of Hogwarts, chaos reigns. Giants crash through walls, Death Eaters unleash dark curses, and friends fall around Harry. In the middle of it all, Bellatrix Lestrange, the most dangerous witch in Voldemort's service, turns her attention to Ginny. This is the moment when Molly reveals her full power. Readers remember the line, "Not my daughter, you bitch." It is a cry of fury, but it is also a declaration that Molly's strength is not limited to her kitchen or her knitting needles. She duels Bellatrix, a witch who tortured Auras into madness and murdered Sirius Black, and Molly wins. This victory is not accidental. It comes from years of quiet, underestimated intelligence. She reads her opponent, fights with precision, and channels the deepest energy a witch can summon, the determination to protect her child. The victory over Bellatrix is more than a duel, it is a symbol. Bellatrix represents cruelty, sadism, and destruction. Molly represents care, love, and protection. Intelligence here is not about clever schemes or hidden prophecies, but about knowing what matters most and fighting for it with everything one has. The fact that Molly, the so-called ordinary housewife, defeats one of Voldemort's most dangerous followers is Rowling's way of saying that intelligence is not always loud. Sometimes it is expressed through the slow accumulation of wisdom, the daily sacrifices, and the ability to act with decisive courage when the moment demands it. Critics sometimes argue that Molly is overprotective, even controlling, especially when she clashes with Sirius or argues with her children. But to see only this is to miss the depth of her perception. Molly knows the fragility of life. She has seen war before, and she has lost loved ones. When she confronts the boggart at Grimmauld Place, it does not show her riches or her failures. It shows her children and Harry lying dead. That vision tells the truth of her mind. She carries the weight of possible loss constantly, and her decisions, whether they look like smothering or not, are shaped by the raw knowledge that survival is never guaranteed. To protect those you love requires foresight, planning, and strength of will. Molly has all of these. Her intelligence also appears in the way she teaches her children values. She raises Bill to be responsible, Charlie to be courageous, Percy to be ambitious, Fred and George to be inventive, Ron to be loyal, and Ginny to be fearless. Not all of these qualities lead to easy paths. Percy's ambition, for instance, drives him into painful estrangement from the family, but Molly's upbringing ensures that each of them has the tools to survive in a fractured world. Raising 7 distinct individuals with such resilience is not the product of luck. It is the product of a mother who understands human nature, who knows how to nurture each child differently. That kind of wisdom is more complex than any textbook spell. Even her relationship with Arthur reveals her cleverness. Arthur, endlessly fascinated by Muggle artifacts and sometimes distracted from practical matters, finds in Molly not just a partner but a grounding force. She respects his quirks but ensures that his family's survival never falters. Their partnership is one of balance. Her practicality meets his curiosity. Her discipline steadies his absent-mindedness. Together they form a unit that survives financial strain, political danger, and the constant threat of Voldemort's return. Molly's role in this partnership is critical, and it shows her ability to blend affection with management. Rowling also uses Molly to illustrate that wisdom often comes disguised in simplicity. When Hermione dazzles with her encyclopedic knowledge and Dumbledore with his cryptic insight, Molly shows that sometimes knowing the right way to comfort, or to prepare a meal, or to time a conversation can be just as profound. In The Half-Blood Prince, when Harry grieves for Sirius, It is not a lecture from a great wizard that comforts him, but the simple constancy of the Weasley home. Molly, without grand speeches, offers stability. That kind of unspoken wisdom can be overlooked, but it is exactly what keeps Harry from collapsing under the weight of trauma. Molly's duel with Bellatrix is often remembered as her shining moment, but in truth, her intelligence is woven through every small decision she makes long before that battle. It is there when she sends care packages to her children at Hogwarts, reminding them they are loved. It is there when she monitors the politics of the ministry, understanding far more than she lets on. It is there when she insists that Harry is one of her own, even though that places her entire family in greater danger. Molly is not naive. She knows the risk. Her choice to embrace Harry anyway is not simply kindness, but a deliberate recognition that fighting Voldemort requires unity, and unity begins at home. In the end, Molly Weasley demonstrates a kind of intelligence that resists easy labels. It is not brilliance in charms like Hermione, or cunning schemes like Snape, or grand visions like Dumbledore. It is the intelligence of endurance, of strategy woven into daily life, of knowing what truly matters and never letting go of it. It is an intelligence that defeats Bellatrix, but it is also one that makes sure there is always food on the table, warmth in the house, and love in the heart of every child she raises. And that is why, when readers look back, they see not just a mother, but a heroine, a woman whose wisdom is measured in lives saved, family preserved, and evil defeated by the power of care. Number 21, Cornelius Fudge. Under the surface of the Harry Potter saga lies a contrast between two very different kinds of intelligence, the underestimated clarity of Harry himself and the self-deluded posturing of Cornelius Fudge. The Minister of Magic, dressed in pinstriped robes and bowler hat, always wanted to appear the clever statesman. He thought of himself as a chess master moving pieces across a board too grand for ordinary witches and wizards to comprehend. Yet time and again his choices revealed a shallow understanding of reality. In the end, his failures cast a shadow over the wizarding world that even Voldemort could not have achieved so swiftly on his own. His intelligence was not absent, but it was warped by ambition, fear, and the desperate need to protect his image. Harry, in contrast, often doubted himself and was underestimated by those around him, but his instinct to see through lies and to face truth, even when it was painful, proved far wiser than the minister's political theatre. The clearest example of Fudge's misguided intellect emerges after Voldemort's return in the graveyard of Little Hangleton. Harry escaped with Cedric Diggory's body, delivering testimony of the Dark Lord's resurrection. It was not only Harry who bore witness. Dumbledore himself, with all his authority, confirmed the truth. And yet Fudge refused to believe. His words in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire were filled with stubborn denial. He's not back. He can't be back. What seemed at first like reasonable caution was in fact a catastrophic refusal to accept reality. Fudge convinced himself that denying Voldemort's return was the smartest course, when it was in fact the most dangerous. This choice showed not intelligence, but cowardice disguised as strategy. Fudge's short-sightedness became even clearer during the following year, as he unleashed a campaign to discredit Harry and Dumbledore. The Daily Prophet became his weapon, twisting public opinion with half-truths and ridicule. He installed Dolores Umbridge at Hogwarts, claiming that oversight was necessary for the safety of students. To the public, this looked like decisive leadership, but beneath the surface, it was political theatre designed to silence dissent. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Rowling shows the absurdity of this control. Educational Decree Number 24, and countless others reduced Hogwarts to a parody of itself. Instead of defending his citizens against a rising Dark Lord, Fudge wasted precious time turning the school into a battlefield of petty power struggles. The irony is that Harry, the boy whom Fudge tried to paint as unstable, consistently displayed a sharper grasp of events. Harry's intelligence was not expressed through academic brilliance like Hermione's, nor through cunning like Snape's. It was rooted in moral clarity an instinctive perception. He knew that telling the truth about Cedric's death and Voldemort's return was worth the ridicule, even when it meant isolation. He saw through the hollow reassurances of authority figures because he trusted the evidence of his own experience. In the Ministry atrium, surrounded by lies, Harry held on to the truth with a stubbornness that Fudge mistook for recklessness. But this stubbornness turned out to be wisdom, because denial cannot defeat darkness. Fudge's belief in his own cleverness was fed by the trappings of office. He surrounded himself with advisers like Dolores Umbridge and Percy Weasley, who reinforced his sense of superiority. He loved to deliver statements with pomp, believing his words alone could reshape reality. "Dumbledore is trying to overthrow me," he declared, convinced that the headmaster's popularity threatened his throne. This paranoia was less a product of intelligence than of insecurity. He saw conspiracies where there were none and ignored the conspiracy that mattered most, the growing network of Death Eaters preparing for war. His supposed cleverness blinded him, while Harry's humble willingness to listen to others, whether Hermione, Ron, or Dumbledore, sharpened his understanding of what truly mattered. The moment Fudge entered the Department of Mysteries after the disastrous battle, his mask crumbled. There was Voldemort, visible to all, locked in a duel with Dumbledore. Fudge stood frozen, his denial shattered in an instant. For months he had wasted time discrediting children, punishing teachers, and denying evidence. In that one terrible moment, every shred of his carefully cultivated cleverness evaporated. He was exposed as a man who had traded genuine foresight for political survival. Harry, battered and grieving for Sirius, nevertheless stood vindicated. The boy whom Fudge had mocked as delusional had in fact been the truest witness of all. What made Fudge's downfall tragic was not simply his lack of intelligence, but his belief that appearances were more important than truth. He measured success not by safety or justice, but by the absence of panic. He assumed that by silencing dissenters, he could silence reality itself. Yet the very act of suppressing the truth only strengthened Voldemort's hand. The Death Eaters operated in secrecy, emboldened by a government that refused to admit the threat. By the time the Ministry acknowledged the danger, countless lives had already been placed at risk. The supposed strategist had in fact handed his enemy the greatest gift, time. Harry, meanwhile, never pretended to be clever. He often felt inadequate compared to Hermione's encyclopedic knowledge or Dumbledore's wisdom. And yet his decisions were rooted in courage and honesty, traits that revealed a deeper kind of intelligence. He chose to lead Dumbledore's army, teaching fellow students practical defense because he saw the danger that Fudge ignored. He opened himself to visions, painful as they were, that connected him to Voldemort. This openness to reality, even when it hurt, gave Harry an advantage that the minister never had. Intelligence is not merely knowing facts, it is the ability to face them. Harry did so while Fudge turned away. One might argue that Fudge's denial was born of pragmatism. After all, admitting Voldemort's return would have caused fear, economic turmoil, and political instability. But true intelligence recognizes that delaying truth does not erase it. Dumbledore understood this, which is why he declared, "It is time for you to choose between what is right and what is easy." Fudge chose what was easy, cloaking his fear in the guise of strategy. Harry, with far less experience, chose what was right. The contrast between the minister and the schoolboy could not be sharper, and Rowling makes sure the reader sees how wisdom often comes from unexpected places. The consequences of Fudge's decisions lingered beyond his tenure. When Rufus Scrimgeour replaced him, the ministry still bore the scars of denial. The public had been conditioned to distrust voices of warning, making Voldemort's eventual open rise even more terrifying. Fudge may have believed he was protecting his reputation, but history remembered him as the minister who failed at the most crucial moment. His downfall demonstrates how intelligence without humility becomes blindness, while humility without arrogance becomes foresight. The Ministry's obsession with appearances mirrored Fudge's personal flaws. He carried himself like a man who believed that speeches could shield a nation. His bowler hat became a symbol of that empty cleverness, a neat facade covering confusion. When he visited Hogwarts to oversee trials, or when he placed Umbridge in power, he believed he was outsmarting Dumbledore, yet every move only deepened his weakness. Harry, with no hat of office and no speeches of grandeur, managed to outthink him simply by insisting on the truth. In comparing Harry and Fudge, one realizes that Rowling is offering a meditation on intelligence itself. Harry rarely solved riddles or mastered complex spells with ease, yet he consistently made the right choices because he refused to deny reality. Fudge, who had all the resources of the wizarding government, made catastrophic errors because he mistook control for wisdom. It is a lesson about the danger of leaders who prefer illusion over truth and about the power of ordinary individuals to see more clearly than those in high office. The tension between appearing clever and being wise plays out in the way Fudge used propaganda. The Daily Prophet headlines mocked Harry as disturbed and dangerous. In doing so, Fudge thought he had neutralized the threat of panic, but what he really did was sow distrust in the institutions meant to protect society. Students learned that the ministry could not be trusted, families argued in fear, and Voldemort gained a climate of confusion in which to rebuild his forces. Harry, though silenced publicly, kept teaching his peers how to defend themselves. That quiet defiance, rooted in truth, proved more effective than the minister's loud proclamations. Even after his exposure, Fudge tried to reclaim dignity. But the damage was irreversible. He had shown that his cleverness was an act, his authority an illusion. Harry, though battered and often in doubt, emerged as the figure people trusted. Rowling carefully constructs this contrast to remind readers that wisdom does not always wear the robes of power. Sometimes it wears the scars of loss, the humility of youth, and the courage to say what others fear to admit. Thus, in the great divide between appearances and reality, Harry Potter stands as the character underestimated but truly intelligent, while Cornelius Fudge stands as the man who thought himself shrewd but revealed his weakness with every decision. The boy who trusted in truth was wiser than the minister who trusted in denial. Rowling's storytelling ensures that the reader never forgets which path leads to chaos and which to light. Number 22. Fred and George Weasley. Fred and George Weasley were often dismissed as the comic relief of the Harry Potter series, the pranksters who turned every serious moment into a chance for mischief. Yet behind the explosions of fireworks, the trick candies, and the perpetual grins lay something much more formidable, a mind that saw opportunity where others saw boundaries. Their brilliance was never presented in the form of academic excellence like Hermione's, nor was it tied to raw magical ability like Harry's. Instead, their genius lived in their creativity, their entrepreneurial instincts, and their refusal to let convention define their worth. What might look to some like chaos was in truth the groundwork for success, built on humor but carried by vision. Their journey toward proving this brilliance began long before they opened the doors of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. From their earliest appearances, Fred and George were already demonstrating a rare kind of innovation. They did not merely pull tricks from books or repeat what had been done before, they invented. Consider their work during their school years, the skiving snack boxes, sweets designed to give students realistic illnesses to escape class. To most, it looked like another prank, but to an observer with sharper eyes, it was a complex experiment in potion-making and magical effects. The ability to blend humor with functional enchantments was the first sign that they were not simply jokers but creators. Hermione once scolded them for wasting their talent, yet in that very scolding was an acknowledgement of their undeniable skill. When the time came to step out from the shadows of Hogwarts, Fred and George seized their moment with a boldness that matched their imagination. Leaving school without finishing their education seemed reckless, almost foolish, but it was in that reckless leap that their genius shone brightest. Armed with Harry's Triwizard Tournament winnings, they transformed a dream into a business. Weasley's Wizard Wheezes on Diagon Alley was not merely a joke shop, it was an empire of creativity. The shop became a symbol of resilience and defiance during Voldemort's rise, and its colourful displays spoke louder than many voices of resistance. Their humour was not an escape from danger, was a weapon against it. The Ministry of Magic, with its bureaucratic inefficiency, often lagged behind in practical magical defence. Fred and George, however, responded to the times with the quick wit of entrepreneurs who understood what people truly needed. Their shield hats, for example, were enchanted items capable of deflecting jinxes and minor hexes. When Ministry officials tested them, they were astonished to find that these twin pranksters had succeeded where official researchers had failed. The boys who once mocked authority had outpaced it. The very institution that dismissed them was suddenly relying on their innovations. This reversal of power illustrated that intelligence is not confined to traditional academic achievement but can thrive in unconventional brilliance. One of the most telling moments came in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when the Weasley twins launched their grand departure from Hogwarts. They did not simply leave, they orchestrated a spectacular rebellion against Dolores Umbridge. Their fireworks, their swamp that remained untouched for months, and the sheer audacity of their exit carried a message. Intelligence is also the art of timing and spectacle. The swamp, which Flitwick later admired and carefully preserved, was not just a prank. It was a statement of defiance crafted through magical ingenuity. "You don't think we're wasting our talents, do you?" George once asked, and the swamp stood as proof that their talents could blend art, humour, and resistance into one act of brilliance. Their products were not mere toys. Take the Peruvian instant darkness powder, for example, which Draco Malfoy later used in Half-Blood Prince. This was not a gag gift, but a tactical tool capable of changing the outcome of battles. The twins had tapped into a deeper understanding of how magic could be applied practically and unpredictably. They bridged the gap between the playful and the serious, demonstrating that intelligence does not always wear a stern face or sit quietly with books. In their hands, even a joke carried the weight of strategy. Their humour was never trivial, it was layered, carrying both laughter and insight. It is also important to consider their ability to inspire loyalty. Their shop thrived not only because of their inventions, but because of the atmosphere they created. Customers did not merely purchase products, they bought into a vision of resilience, joy, and rebellion against despair. During a time when fear shadowed every corner of the wizarding world, Fred and George reminded people that creativity and courage could coexist with laughter. They were not just selling goods, they were selling hope disguised as fun. Their understanding of human nature, the psychology of humour, the relief of laughter in dark times, was as sharp as any spell they crafted. Even their failures showed intelligence of a different kind. Innovation requires risk, and Fred and George were never afraid to test boundaries. Whether experimenting on themselves with new products or daring to challenge the Ministry's decrees, they embraced failure as part of the creative process. It is this willingness to fail publicly that separates inventors from imitators. Unlike students who feared low marks, the twins understood that mistakes could be stepping stones to triumph. Their shop shelves, overflowing with imaginative products, stood as monuments to their countless trials and errors, each setback transformed into a lesson. There is a profound irony in how their brilliance was recognized. While their mother, Molly Weasley, often despaired of their academic records and Hermione frowned at their disregard for schoolwork, it was Dumbledore who seemed to truly appreciate their potential. By tolerating their antics, sometimes even smiling at them, he revealed a deeper understanding that intelligence takes many forms. Their fireworks against Umbridge were not punished, but celebrated. Flitwick, charmed by their swamp, carefully cordoned it off instead of removing it. These subtle acknowledgments from wise professors highlight that real genius cannot always be measured by grades or traditional achievement. Fred and George had carved their own path. The contrast between their perceived image and their actual accomplishments is at the heart of their story. To those who saw only mischief, they were clowns, but those who looked closer found inventors, entrepreneurs, and strategists. In many ways, their journey is a commentary on society's narrow definition of intelligence. Just as Harry's true strength was never in book knowledge but in courage and instinct, Fred and George embodied another form of brilliance, an intelligence that thrives on risk, imagination, and the courage to laugh in the face of fear. They represent the idea that intelligence is not a single mold but a spectrum of gifts, often hidden behind masks of playfulness. When the darker times came, their contributions carried even more weight. In Deathly Hallows, as the war escalated, their shop remained one of the few bright beacons of resistance. Their ability to supply useful defensive tools became critical. Even in the face of tragedy, Fred's death, the legacy of their genius lived on. George, carrying on the business, proved that their vision was more than a passing fancy. It was a lasting contribution to the wizarding world. Their humor had built something enduring, a symbol that outlasted fear and loss. Genius, after all, is not only about invention, but also about the power to leave behind something that continues to inspire. The Weasley twins also remind us that intelligence is not always solemn. Laughter is often dismissed as frivolous, yet it takes great insight to understand its power. Their fireworks, jokes, and inventions were not distractions but tools of resistance, designed to remind people of joy in dark times. In this way, they echoed the wisdom of Dumbledore himself, who said, "Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light." Fred and George's entire philosophy embodied this idea, turning humour into a light that pierced the shadows of Voldemort's reign. Looking back, their legacy is one of triumph over underestimation. They were never prefects, never top of their class, and never recognized by the traditional structures of authority. Yet in their own way, they changed the wizarding world more than many who wore medals and titles. They built a business that thrived even in war, invented products that surpassed official magic, and inspired countless others to believe that laughter and creativity could be weapons as powerful as wands. Their story is a reminder that genius wears many disguises, and sometimes it looks like a joke before it reveals its brilliance. To see Fred and George merely as jokers is to miss the point of their arc entirely. They were innovators cloaked in humour, entrepreneurs disguised as pranksters, and visionaries hidden behind fireworks. Their lives tell us that intelligence is not defined by conformity, but by imagination and courage. In the wizarding world, as in our own, those who dare to laugh, to create, and to defy expectations often change the course of history. The twins showed us that sometimes the greatest minds are the ones that make us laugh while quietly reshaping the world around us. Number 23, Cho Chang. Cho Chang is too often remembered as nothing more than Harry Potter's fleeting crush, a pretty face who exists in the background of Quidditch matches and corridor conversations. Yet to leave her at that surface level is to strip away the depth J.K. Rowling gave her in the books. Beneath the soft-spoken demeanour and the vulnerability of grief lies a witch of great intelligence, instinct, and courage. Her role is not defined by Harry's attention, nor by her emotional struggles, but by the way she acts in crucial moments when reason and quick thinking are needed most. Readers who look carefully find a character far more complex than her cinematic portrayal suggests, and her choices tell us something important about the hidden strength of seemingly secondary figures in the wizarding world. When we first encounter Cho, it is easy to be distracted by Harry's starry-eyed admiration. She is a seeker for Ravenclaw, and the first striking detail is that she matches Harry in skill on the Quidditch pitch. This is no small feat. Harry's talent is repeatedly called extraordinary, yet Cho is described as agile and quick, with a sharp mind for strategy. During the third book, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the match between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw highlights her clever tactics. She attempts to distract Harry by flying in front of him, and though she does not succeed in beating him to the snitch, the moment illustrates her ability to plan under pressure. That intelligence masked under the surface of a school rivalry is a key element of her character that rarely receives attention. Her membership in Dumbledore's army is another testimony to her capacity for logical reasoning and bravery. When Dolores Umbridge transforms Hogwarts into a suffocating place of surveillance and suppression, Cho makes the conscious decision to join an illegal student resistance. The DA was not a mere club. It carried the risk of expulsion or even worse consequences under the Ministry's hostile control. Cho knew this, and still she chose to stand with Harry, Hermione, Neville, and others. This act alone demonstrates a level of practical bravery. She did not allow fear to rule her, and she understood the necessity of gaining real defensive knowledge when the official curriculum left students vulnerable. By siding with reason instead of obedience, she proved herself sharper than many of her peers. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Cho's duel with her classmates during the DA meetings shows her skill as a witch. Rowling writes of the sessions in the Room of Requirement with vivid detail, describing how Cho was quick to master defensive spells. She casts the shield charm, she practices the disarming charm, and she spars with confidence. These are not the actions of a fragile schoolgirl overwhelmed by her crush on Harry. They are the practiced movements of a determined young witch preparing for the dangers that lay beyond Hogwarts' walls. It is telling that Cho is not singled out as weaker than her peers in these duels. On the contrary, she fits seamlessly among a group that would later confront Death Eaters at the Ministry. Yet it is true that Cho's emotional state is often portrayed as fragile. After Cedric Diggory's death, her grief becomes an integral part of her story. Many readers misinterpret these moments as signs of weakness, when in truth they reveal the duality of her character. She can be brilliant, focused, and capable in structured settings like the DA, while also carrying the unbearable weight of loss. It is this contrast that makes her so human. A logical mind does not cancel out emotion, and Cho embodies that struggle. She attempts to reconcile her clear reasoning with the storm of sorrow that overwhelms her. Far from being a flaw, this dual nature mirrors the reality of how people face trauma in adolescence. The famous line where Cho breaks into tears while discussing Cedric with Harry, "You'd rather be with Hermione Granger," is often remembered as her weakness. But in the context of her life, it reveals more about how grief collides with logic. Cho knows Hermione is intelligent, and close to Harry, she knows Harry shares a bond with Hermione. In her mourning state, her logical observation transforms into insecurity. The tragedy is not that she is irrational, but that her rational mind becomes coloured by fear of being replaced in both memory and affection. For readers who demand neat categories of strong and weak, Cho seems contradictory. Yet that very contradiction reveals an intelligence at war with raw emotion. It is easy to forget that Cho shows courage not only in practicing spells, but also in aligning herself with figures who challenge authority. During Harry's ostracism in Order of the Phoenix, when the Ministry brands him a liar, Cho does not immediately turn away from him. Many students at Hogwarts dismiss Harry as delusional or attention-seeking. Cho, however, is willing to listen, to weigh truth against propaganda. She shows a capacity for independent judgment at an age when peer pressure is overwhelming. It is no small thing to side with an unpopular figure, and it indicates the clarity with which she could see through the Ministry's smear campaign. Her defense of Marietta Edgecombe, though controversial, further illustrates her layered intelligence. When Marietta betrays the DA to Umbridge, Cho does not excuse the act, but attempts to contextualize it. She understands the pressure Marietta was under, given her mother's position at the Ministry. This capacity for empathy shows that Cho could grasp perspectives beyond her own. While many readers fault her for defending a traitor, one can also see this as a sign of intellectual maturity. She did not reduce Marietta to a simple villain, but analyzed the larger forces at play, a skill that demands a thoughtful, rational mind. A particularly telling moment comes in the way Cho approaches Harry during their brief relationship. She does not simply swoon over him as the films suggest. She challenges him, asking questions about Cedric, about his experiences, about his feelings. These are not empty conversations. They are attempts to understand complex realities from another's perspective. Her curiosity demonstrates both intelligence and emotional need, for she is seeking clarity in a world that has given her loss without explanation. It is not a shallow infatuation, it is a dialogue driven by her search for sense in chaos. Her emotional outbursts, often criticized, should be reframed as part of her courage. It takes bravery to show vulnerability, to confront the painful memories of Cedric openly. Many Hogwarts students chose silence or denial as a defense mechanism. Cho instead faced the storm, even if it led to tears. This willingness to acknowledge emotion while still participating in the DA reveals a balance of qualities rarely celebrated in her. Intelligence without humanity can become cold calculation. Cho embodies the union of sharp thought and raw feeling, and that union is what makes her compelling. The films flatten this nuance by reducing Cho to a mere love interest whose primary function is to cry and then vanish. This simplification has unfortunately shaped popular perception, but the books tell a different story. Rowling's text gives us glimpses of a girl who can cast powerful spells, analyze situations with clarity, and still carry the full complexity of grief. When Harry notices her, looking tear-stained but determined, the juxtaposition is deliberate. She is not broken. She is moving forward, carrying both her sorrow and her strength. One of the strongest examples of Cho's reasoning is her choice to resist Umbridge's authority despite knowing the consequences. Many older and supposedly wiser witches and wizards in the Ministry failed to resist the slow erosion of freedom. Cho, a teenager, acted with greater foresight. She knew that pretending compliance would not prepare her for the real threat of Voldemort and his followers. This is logic at its clearest. Survival requires knowledge, and knowledge would not come from the Ministry's sanitized curriculum. Her choice is the choice of a rational mind acting against oppression. The criticism that Cho was too emotional often reveals more about readers' expectations than about Cho herself. In a world where intelligence is often equated with coldness, Cho disrupts the stereotype. She proves that logical reasoning can coexist with feeling and that strength can appear in forms beyond stoicism. Cedric's death left a wound, but it did not erase her sharpness as a duelist, her skill as a seeker, or her ability to analyze circumstances beyond appearances. Cho embodies the truth that intelligence is not a sterile quality, but one that survives even through tears. In this way, Cho Chang mirrors a theme running throughout Rowling's work. The underestimated characters often carry wisdom hidden from those who dismiss them. Just as Neville Longbottom grows from awkwardness into heroism, Cho grows through grief into resilience. The tragedy is that her story is overshadowed by Harry's perspective, which sees her mainly through the lens of romantic tension. But for readers willing to look closer, Cho is not a minor figure. She is a reminder that intelligence wears many faces, sometimes disguised by tears, but always revealed in decisive acts of reason and courage. Number 24, Horace Slughorn. Of all the professors Harry encountered at Hogwarts, Horace Slughorn remains one of the most underestimated figures. On the surface, he seems like a man more interested in candied pineapple, velvet armchairs, and endless banquets than in the dangerous art of potion-making or the moral burdens of wizarding society. His round frame and easy laughter make him appear as someone with little ambition, a relic of the old world of comfort and indulgence. Yet beneath this carefully constructed exterior lies a sharp and calculating mind, one that knew how to survive not only the rise of Voldemort, but also the cutthroat politics of the magical world. Slughorn was never a Dumbledore or a Snape, whose brilliance manifested in raw magical ability, but he was brilliant in a different way. His intellect thrived in observation, selection, and social maneuvering. Slughorn's brilliance is most clearly demonstrated in his ability to identify talent before it blooms. Unlike other professors who might treat their classes with indifference, he had a gift for noticing hidden sparks of potential. When a young Tom Riddle entered his classroom, Slughorn immediately recognized the boy's exceptional charm and intelligence. He may not have understood the darkness that lay beneath, but he saw the charisma that could bend others to his will. This gift was not limited to spotting dark ambition. He also saw in Lily Evans years later the mark of a being who was both gifted and compassionate. As Slughorn himself admitted in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, "Your mother, my boy, was one of my absolute favourites. Brilliant, the pair of you, and exceptionally talented at potions." His ability to notice, encourage, and collect such talent was not mere favouritism. It was a form of intellectual discernment, the art of reading people better than most could. The so-called Slug Club may appear frivolous, even elitist, yet it reveals a deeper aspect of Slughorn's mind. By gathering around himself students who showed promise, he was creating not just a dinner club but a network of future leaders. He had Gwenog Jones, the captain of the Holyhead Harpies. He had Marcus Belby, nephew of the inventor of the Wolfsbane potion, and of course he had Harry himself. This network gave Slughorn influence that no spell could provide. Influence, after all, is one of the most powerful currencies in any society, magical or otherwise. While others might seek to hoard knowledge or accumulate magical artifacts, Slughorn collected people. His understanding that human connections were the most enduring form of power demonstrates a kind of intelligence that transcends the classroom. Yet Slughorn's intellect was not only in spotting talent, but also in survival. Many professors, faced with Voldemort's rise, chose sides too hastily or underestimated the danger. Slughorn, however, vanished into hiding, refusing to align himself with either side until forced. This caution has often been mistaken for cowardice, but it was also pragmatism. Slughorn knew the value of self-preservation, and he understood that sometimes survival requires humility, even deception. In Half-Blood Prince, when Dumbledore tracked him down in the small village where he had been living in disguise, Slughorn had already been hiding for a year, changing houses frequently to avoid detection. Such caution required foresight, constant calculation, and above all an awareness of how dangerous his own knowledge could be if it fell into the wrong hands. One of the most revealing examples of Slughorn's hidden intelligence is his memory of Tom Riddle's question about Horcruxes. At first glance, it seems he foolishly revealed information to the most dangerous student Hogwarts had ever seen, but the true depth lies in his lifelong shame over that moment. He understood, better than anyone, the consequences of his slip. It haunted him so much that he altered his memory with magic, distorting the truth to hide his guilt. Only when Harry pressed him with the memory of Lily did he finally allow Dumbledore to see the unaltered version. The fact that Slughorn could even manipulate his own memory to such a convincing degree speaks to his deep knowledge of advanced magic. As Dumbledore himself admitted, Horace has always had a certain ability, a certain cleverness in his way. His concealment of the Horcrux memory proves that his intellect extended beyond mere charm and into mastery of the subtlety of memory and guilt. Another measure of Slughorn's intelligence is the way he wielded charm as a weapon. He was not a duelist, not a war hero, and not a revolutionary, but his ability to win people over, to make them feel valued, was a form of manipulation that required both skill and emotional insight. When Harry first met him, Slughorn attempted to recruit him into the Slug Club not because of Harry's grades, but because of his fame and connections. This reveals Slughorn's sharp instinct. He knew that Harry's reputation would make him central in the future of the wizarding world. "I'm something of a collector, Potter," he said. That self-awareness is crucial. Unlike others who might be blind to their own ambition, Slughorn understood exactly what he was doing, and he embraced it openly. The contrast between Slughorn and Severus Snape underscores just how unique his intelligence was. Snape embodied the type of brilliance that thrived in mastery of spells and potions, the pure academic genius that could rewrite textbooks. Slughorn, however, lacked that obsessive rigor. Instead, he excelled in what could be called social intelligence. He knew how to flatter, how to create loyalty, how to surround himself with the successful so that their glory would reflect back on him. His refusal to join Voldemort, despite the temptations, was not simply cowardice. It was a recognition that attaching oneself to a cause so dark could destroy the delicate network he had built. In his own way, Slughorn was more farsighted than many of his colleagues. At times, Slughorn's laziness has been mistaken for incompetence, yet his seeming idleness was calculated. By presenting himself as a harmless, indulgent old man, he invited others to underestimate him. This allowed him to avoid suspicion, to slip into the background when danger arose. Few Death Eaters viewed him as a threat, and even Voldemort did not pursue him with the intensity he directed at others. This camouflage, this choice to appear less than he was, reveals another layer of subtle intelligence. Only someone deeply aware of human perception would know how to play the role of the harmless professor while concealing a sharper awareness underneath. One might argue that Slughorn's greatest moment of brilliance was not in memory or manipulation, but in courage born from guilt. During the Battle of Hogwarts, he faced Voldemort directly, fighting alongside Minerva McGonagall and Kingsley Shacklebolt. For a man who had spent his life avoiding direct confrontation, this was an extraordinary decision. It demonstrated that he understood when the time for subtlety was over, when intellect had to be paired with action. In this moment, Slughorn revealed that intelligence is not only about survival, but also about recognizing when survival means nothing without principle. He had calculated for years, but on that night he chose to risk everything, proving that his mind was not ruled solely by self-interest. Even in smaller details, his mind shows through. Consider his potions lessons. Unlike Snape, whose teaching often humiliated students, Slughorn created an environment that encouraged experimentation. His lesson on the Draft of Living Death, in which Harry used the Half-Blood Prince's annotated book to outperform Hermione, reveals how much Slughorn appreciated ingenuity. Rather than scolding Harry, he rewarded him with Felix Felicis, the rarest of potions. This demonstrated his understanding that success often comes from unconventional methods. He knew that talent could express itself in unexpected ways, and he rewarded those who showed initiative. Slughorn also displayed wisdom in how he regarded Lily Evans. While many professors treated her as merely a talented Muggle-born, he recognized her unique abilities and kindness. His fondness for her was not just sentimental. It reflected his understanding that compassion combined with brilliance was a rare and valuable trait. It was this memory of Lily that ultimately moved him to give Harry the unaltered truth about Horcruxes. This shows that Slughorn was not only a man of calculation, but also one who understood the power of legacy and the value of goodness. His intelligence was not purely strategic, it was also emotional, rooted in his ability to recognize qualities that would shape the future. In the end, Horace Slughorn forces us to reconsider what intelligence truly means in the wizarding world. It is easy to admire the raw brilliance of Hermione Granger, the fearless genius of Dumbledore, or the dangerous brilliance of Voldemort. But Slughorn's intelligence was quieter, more subtle, often hidden behind laughter and food. His mind worked not in grand gestures, but in careful choices, in the ability to read people, to connect threads, and to ensure his survival while nurturing talent. He was a collector, yes, but collectors know value when they see it. And in this way, Slughorn proved that sometimes the sharpest minds are those least suspected. Number 25. Crabbe and Goyle. Of all the secondary characters who passed through the long corridors of Hogwarts, few seemed as predictable as Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle. They were shadows glued to Draco Malfoy, looming figures whose physical size contrasted sharply with their apparent lack of wit. Throughout the early years, J.K. Rowling portrayed them as caricatures of dullness, slow, clumsy, easily manipulated, and without an ounce of individuality. Yet the very end of the saga pulled the curtain aside to reveal something entirely unexpected. When Crabbe unleashed fiend fire in the Room of Requirement, the image of the brainless sidekick shattered. It raised a startling question about intelligence, about hidden knowledge, and about how much we really understood these boys. The Room of Requirement scene in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows is one of the most chaotic and frightening episodes in the entire series. Harry, Ron, and Hermione return to retrieve the lost diadem of Ravenclaw, but Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle confront them. What should have been another episode of intimidation by Draco and his followers takes a terrifying turn. Crabbe steps forward, and rather than throwing fists or relying on brute force, he conjures a magical fire of such dark and advanced nature that even the trio is shocked. As Rowling describes, a great wave of fiery beasts swept the room, killing everything in their path. This was no simple hex, no childish attempt at aggression. It was fiend fire, one of the most uncontrollable and deadly spells in wizarding magic. Fiend fire is not just fire, it is living flame that takes the shape of enormous beasts, lions, serpents, chimeras, devouring all in their way, even Horcruxes, which are otherwise nearly indestructible. According to magical lore in the series, only very skilled and knowledgeable wizards dare to attempt it. Hermione herself, usually the voice of wisdom, exclaimed in horror that even she would not risk such magic. "That was fiend fire! You heard what it can do! How did Crabbe know how to—" Her words show how deeply this moment contradicted everything known about him. The implication was clear. Crabbe had studied something dangerous, something forbidden, and he had succeeded in conjuring it even if he could not control it. If one steps back and considers the image of Crabbe throughout the books, this revelation feels like a hidden message placed by Rowling. He is almost always shown eating, laughing at Draco's cruelty, or serving as a physical wall of muscle. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, he and Goyle even take Polyjuice Potion without question, disguising themselves to help Malfoy. Their stupidity is played for humor, especially when they struggle to comprehend the simplest instructions. Yet behind this mask of dullness, perhaps there was curiosity, a reckless streak that sought something more. When Crabbe raised his wand in that decisive moment, he revealed a side of himself that had been brewing silently: ambition, experimentation, and a dangerous grasp of magical theory. The tragedy, of course, is that Crabbe's intelligence manifested in the most destructive way possible. He did not practice control, nor did he seek wisdom. He sought raw power. The fiend fire devoured him in the very moment of its triumph. Rowling's description spares no detail. Crabbe was screaming, his arms flailing as the fire swallowed him. For a character mocked for his lack of brains, his end was ironically one of the most intelligent and catastrophic displays of magic in the series. Unlike many who fell in the Battle of Hogwarts, Crabbe did not die as a soldier, but as a victim of his own knowledge consumed by the very fire he conjured. This makes one reconsider what it means to be intelligent in the wizarding world. Harry himself was often criticized for not being the brightest student. Snape sneered that Harry's fame had carried him further than his actual skills. Yet Harry survived not through academic brilliance, but through instinct, courage, and a rare kind of emotional intelligence. Crabbe, on the other hand, revealed the opposite. He had discovered a spell that even the most learned witches feared to attempt, yet he lacked the wisdom to handle it. Intelligence without restraint, without judgment, becomes destruction. This juxtaposition between Harry and Crabbe is striking, one underestimated for being ordinary, the other dismissed as stupid, yet in the end their choices defined their fates. The contrast deepens when remembering Draco Malfoy. Throughout the series, Draco is the schemer, the one given lines of sarcasm and elaborate insults. He is the natural leader of his small gang, Yet when the moment of crisis arrived, Draco did not summon power. He panicked, hesitated, and even begged for survival. Crabbe, not Draco, reached for the most terrifying magic in the room. This inversion of expectations is perhaps one of Rowling's cleverest subversions. The boy who seemed to exist only as a sidekick suddenly seized agency, even if it was his final act. Draco survived because of Harry's mercy. Crabbe perished because of his own daring. The hierarchy of intelligence and power among the Slytherin trio collapsed in that room of fire. Rowling's choice of Fiendfire is significant. Unlike the Killing Curse or the Cruciatus, Fiendfire is not associated with quick cruelty or dominance over others. It is an elemental force, a magic of chaos. Only someone with reckless confidence would attempt it in such a confined space. It suggests that Crabbe had been studying dark arts independently, perhaps inspired by the environment of the Carrows and Voldemort's followers. While Draco had been forced into servitude and Goyle remained as loyal muscle, Crabbe might have secretly embraced the allure of forbidden spells. The irony is that he may have been more aligned with Voldemort's destructive philosophy than either of his companions. Quotes from the books remind us of Crabbe's previous portrayal, making the contrast sharper. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Rowling describes Crabbe and Goyle were chuckling stupidly at every word Draco said. Their laughter, their simplicity, was a constant background noise. No one would have predicted that this same boy, years later, would conjure flames that could destroy one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Even Harry, in the heat of battle, was stunned by the irony. He did not view Crabbe as a rival, but as a nuisance. Yet Crabbe inadvertently struck a critical blow against Voldemort's immortality. His recklessness accomplished what countless brave wizards had died to achieve, the destruction of a Horcrux. There is also a thematic layer in Crabbe's death. Fire in mythology often symbolizes both creation and destruction, knowledge and punishment. Prometheus stole fire for mankind. It brought progress but also eternal suffering. Crabbe's Fiendfire is a distorted echo of that myth. He seized forbidden knowledge and it destroyed him. His death is not noble, not heroic, but it reveals how power without understanding leads to ruin. Rowling places this lesson within the chaos of the final battle, showing that not only heroes, but also forgotten side characters could embody such tragic truths. Goyle's role in this scene sharpens the comparison. Goyle does not conjure Fiendfire. Instead, he panics, stumbling and nearly perishing before being saved by Harry and Ron. If Crabbe's act revealed dangerous intelligence, Goyle remained true to his caricature, the frightened follower, without initiative. This divergence between the two longtime companions underscores the individuality often overlooked in their pairing. They were never identical, though readers tended to view them as interchangeable. In truth, Crabbe's end proved he had an identity distinct from Goyle's, reckless, ambitious, and fatally daring. What makes this revelation so haunting is how little it mattered in the grand scheme. Crabbe's death is tragic, but it is also a footnote in the larger war. Harry, Hermione, and Ron escape. The diadem is destroyed, and the battle rages on. Yet for readers who look closely, this moment lingers. It is a reminder that even the least celebrated characters can carry secrets. It challenges us to rethink every minor figure, to wonder what hidden skills, fears, or choices defined them outside the protagonist's gaze. Crabbe was never the fool he appeared to be. He was something darker, something more dangerous. The very fact that Rowling chose Crabbe, not Draco or Goyle, to conjure Fiendfire is telling. It was a final burst of characterization, a sudden blaze that illuminated what had been hidden for 7 books. The laughter, the stupidity, the endless eating in the great hall, all of it concealed a boy who had dipped into shadows deeper than anyone suspected. His fate was sealed, but his fire left a mark on the story. The destruction of Ravenclaw's diadem, one of Voldemort's most precious Horcruxes, stands as a testament to Crabbe's unexpected significance. In the end, Harry Potter's saga often emphasized that appearances deceive. The Sorting Hat warned that even the bravest could belong in Slytherin, that choice mattered more than talent. Neville Longbottom, once mocked as a hopeless case, grew into a hero who destroyed Nagini. Severus Snape, seen as cruel and heartless, carried the deepest loyalty. And Crabbe, dismissed as stupid, proved capable of summoning one of the deadliest spells in magical history. His intelligence was twisted, his ambition unrestrained, but he was never the simpleton the school believed him to be. Number 26, Albus Severus Potter. Of all the children born into the legacy of the Battle of Hogwarts, Albus Severus Potter carried perhaps the heaviest burden. Being the son of Harry Potter, the boy who lived and the man who defeated Lord Voldemort, meant that every glance from his peers came loaded with comparison. Teachers watched him more closely than they might have watched any other student, hoping to see echoes of his father's bravery or his mother's intelligence. Yet, from the very first chapters of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, Albus is shown resisting these expectations, stumbling in places where people expected him to shine, but also surprising in ways that no one predicted. He was not destined to be a copy of Harry, and in this resistance lies his intelligence, the refusal to be defined by the world around him. The Sorting Hat scene is the first key moment that reveals his independence of thought. Harry, anxious for his son, told him on platform 9 3/4 that it would not matter if he was sorted into Slytherin. Albus, however, entered Hogwarts already aware of the shadow looming over him. When the Sorting Hat placed him in Slytherin rather than Gryffindor, whispers spread across the school corridors. It seemed to many a failure, an ironic twist for the son of the most famous Gryffindor of the century. Yet this moment is also the foundation of his character. Albus's placement in Slytherin is not a punishment, but an opportunity. The Hat saw qualities in him that the world refused to acknowledge: ambition, cunning, and the willingness to make hard choices. It was his first lesson in subverting expectation. As the years passed, his differences from his father grew sharper. Where Harry had been athletic, finding joy on the Quidditch pitch, Albus struggled and withdrew. Where Harry had thrived among friends, Albus often found himself isolated. But isolation is fertile ground for a mind that refuses to bend. His refusal to conform became a kind of intellectual rebellion. The boy who failed to meet others' expectations quietly learned to craft his own path. His intelligence was not displayed in classroom triumphs or house points, but in the difficult art of shaping his own identity under crushing weight. The friendship between Albus and Scorpius Malfoy became the clearest example of this skill. To the outside world, such a friendship seemed unthinkable. Their fathers had been enemies, their surnames carried entire histories of conflict, and students mocked them mercilessly. Yet Albus saw what others did not. Scorpius was kind, loyal, and possessed of an intellect that sparkled in quiet corners. While others treated him as a rival or even a threat, Albus forged an alliance. This choice to embrace Scorpius, when all logic dictated they should despise each other, demonstrated his capacity for independent thought. It was not just rebellion, it was strategy. He found an ally where others saw an enemy, echoing the same Slytherin qualities that the Hat had perceived years before. The power of this friendship is most evident when Albus conceives the plan to use a time-turner. Here lies another layer of his intelligence, the ability to see possibilities others ignored. Confronted with the grief of Amos Diggory, who still mourned Cedric, Albus considered what others would not even entertain. "If I could do anything to save Cedric, I would," he declared, showing both empathy and daring. It was a reckless idea, yes, but it was born of compassion and a refusal to accept limits. In that moment, Albus demonstrated the creative spark of intelligence, not the ability to memorize spells, but the willingness to imagine what could be different. The Time-Turner adventure became the crucible for his cunning. Albus and Scorpius travelled back to the Triwizard Tournament to prevent Cedric's death, and though the plan unravelled disastrously, what is striking is Albus's adaptability. Each misstep forced him to reassess, and though he faltered, he kept searching for solutions. Unlike Harry, who often relied on instinct and courage, Albus combined instinct with persistence in reasoning through impossible situations. Even when their meddling fractured time itself, he never stopped analysing the consequences. His failures were not proof of stupidity, but of a mind grappling with complexity, wrestling with paradoxes that no child should ever face. When their interference created an alternate reality where Voldemort ruled, Albus had to confront the full weight of his choices. In this dark world where Harry was dead and the Resistance crushed, Albus realized the cost of reckless compassion. Yet the clarity he gained from this horror revealed another dimension of his mind, the ability to learn from catastrophe. Few children could have endured the guilt of reshaping history so destructively. Albus, however, absorbed it, re-evaluated his actions, and resolved to put things right. This growth reflects a deeper intelligence, one rooted in humility and self-awareness. Scorpius, ever the studious counterpart, often provided the technical knowledge, but Albus contributed a kind of daring intuition that complemented it. Their partnership was not simply two boys clinging to each other out of loneliness. It was a union of minds, each providing what the other lacked. Scorpius's brilliance in magical theory merged with Albus's boldness in strategy, allowing them to survive where either alone might have perished. Intelligence is not always about solitary brilliance. Sometimes it lies in knowing whom to trust and how to blend strengths. Albus's choice of ally ensured that even in fractured timelines, hope persisted. Consider the moment when they discovered Delphi, the supposed niece of Amos Diggory, who later revealed herself as the daughter of Voldemort and Bellatrix. Many characters underestimated Delphi, but Albus sensed her danger earlier than most. Though she initially charmed them, Albus noticed inconsistencies in her story and grew suspicious. His reluctance to fully trust her, even before the truth unravelled, illustrates his instinct for seeing beyond appearances. This was the same boy accused of being gullible or foolish, yet he caught glimpses of a hidden threat where adults had turned a blind eye. The confrontation with Delphi became the defining test of his intelligence. Trapped in Godric's Hollow on the night before Voldemort killed his grandparents, Albus and Scorpius realized Delphi's plan to reshape destiny. Albus, faced with the possibility of altering the single most critical moment in wizarding history, grasped what many older wizards had struggled to understand. Some events could not be undone without destroying the fabric of the world. He recognized that stopping Delphi was not about heroism, but about preserving balance. His solution was cunning. He used the limitations of the Time Turner itself to trap her, forcing her into exposure rather than direct defeat. Here the Slytherin instincts of strategy and misdirection triumphed where brute force could not. Even in his strained relationship with Harry, Albus demonstrated intellectual depth. Their conflict was not born of teenage rebellion alone, but of Albus's refusal to accept shallow reassurances. When Harry told him, "There are times I wish you weren't my son," it shattered him, but also hardened his resolve to prove his own worth. His anger was not thoughtless. It was rooted in a profound need to be understood for who he truly was, not as a reflection of someone else. That need fueled his choices, mistakes, and victories. It was a form of emotional intelligence often overlooked, an awareness of self so intense it hurt. The brilliance of Albus Severus Potter lies not in shining achievements recorded in school trophies or OWL results, but in the subtle defiance of expectation. He showed that intelligence can mean standing in opposition to the world, refusing easy labels, and embracing alliances that defy history. His cleverness is not the Gryffindor bravery of Harry, nor the bookish mastery of Hermione. It is something quieter, rooted in cunning and empathy, in the audacity to make choices no one else dared.